Welcome again to the ECR Retail Loss Podcast. I'm joined again by Professor Emmeline Taylor, and this week we're discussing the use of facial recognition technology in retail. Now, we're turning our attention today to the world of facial recognition, although people call it biometrics, face matching, person recognition, all sorts of, and we've been studying this now at ECR at least 10 years. So we've had 2 or 3 meetings, well, at least 1 meeting per year, sometimes 2 meetings per year, where retailers would come to our group and share, here's what we're doing on facial recognition. So, about 6 years ago, we had a really great presentation from Rite Aid, and they shared what they're doing, 120 stores, how they've been able to identify the prolific offenders. And then Reuters wrote a report, and suddenly the legal team got worried about this, and everything was pulled overnight. So we know it's a very sensitive area, sort of big sort of brothers looking out for you. And we tend to sort of look at, and this group, again, we meet at least once a year on this topic. We tend to look at it in both, we tend to look at the use case around a watch list. But there are other uses that people are using facial recognition. So we saw it the other day in a security operations center I visited. They were using that to let people in and out of the security operations center. In distribution warehouses, access control is clearly getting a bit more uses. But also there are some people looking at using facial recognition on a retrospective basis. But the one we tend to sort of focus in on is the use around the watch list. Someone has done something bad in the store. It's then recorded and put into a database of sorts. And when that person comes back into the store, there is a response from the store. We'll get into what that response is like. And I think we're getting to a stage now where we've got, actually, there's quite a few retailers, and we had, what was it, like 3 or 4 retailers who said on the call, who shared their work from around the world. So we had insights from some tests done in Australia and New Zealand. We had some work from America and some work being done in the UK. So we're getting to sort of some retailers now who actually scaled it and have got some results. And whilst they haven't sort of shouted about it from the rooftops, they've aligned top management to what they're trying to do and the aims and objectives and the guardrails. And, one of them reported, that they had a 25% reduction in their shrinkage number, which, is a pretty impressive number in terms of, and that obviously giving a very positive feedback. Another retailer just talked about just more as a sort of, a lesser number, that maybe 10 or 15%, but just showed how they were solving, it seems, all the crimes over there in America, in that particular part of the world. We never had so many cases presented in such a short time. Bang, 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 bang. These sorts of things happened in the car park. These people came in around some sort of gift card trial, and we found our own employees, the third-party vendor, all the things that they found. So it's a very controversial area, lots of discussion areas. Where it goes next, if you ask these people, they've become somewhat, the retailers anyway we spoke to were on the call in part because they are evangelists. They've seen that this can be the biggest game changer for them in terms of loss prevention, and so they evangelize it, and it's great for us to listen to that. But I still sense there's nervousness. Anyway, you're very heavily involved in this for a long time. I think you've got a research project that you want to do in the future. What's some of the things you're thinking about in this space?
Yeah, I mean, I'm fascinated by facial recognition, and I think even though it is something that's been around for several years, as you mentioned, I don't think there's many topics that are quite as hot as this one at the moment. And on the one hand, we've got anecdotal evidence that it's hugely successful on a range of metrics, and I'll come to those in a moment. But on the other hand, there's still this huge nervousness, this reticence to use it. People are uncomfortable about whether, are they going to be able to adhere to the prevailing sort of legislative framework in the country that they're operating? Are they going to put customers off? There's still a lot of these questions, I think, that businesses feel haven't yet been satisfactorily answered. So we had several presentations in that meeting, and as you say, 4 different countries represented: America, the UK, Australia and New Zealand, and they all presented quite different use cases as well. We sort of think of facial recognition as being one thing, but actually the way it's being used is really different. And some of that is because what you can and can't do in those jurisdictions. But others is around, trial, testing. Where is this going to be, most effective? And what really struck me is that we think of facial recognition primarily being around catching the bad guys, getting that ping that we've got a bad actor, coming back in repeatedly, putting a cap on, trying to evade detection. And there were some brilliant stats presented on that. As you mentioned, 25% reduction in shrink, the time saving. So one of the presenters said what typically would have been perhaps a 3-month investigation took 3 hours, because they were just able to pull up that they had somebody who was traveling the country doing the same MO, they'd been under the radar, and suddenly, wow, they just had every single incident in front of them. But it was the peripheral benefits as well. So as you said, this one retailer, they had the police coming to them searching for wanted felons for all sorts of unsavoury criminal
Very
acts.
unsavoury.
They're awful. I mean, there was murders, there was sexual violence, all sorts of individuals being caught through the retail facial recognition. There was missing persons being found, and of real interest to me as well was the number of internal employees that were pinging on their system, maybe going to a different store where they didn't work. Big issue.
Can't make it up, can you?
I know. So it was just, the case they gave was really compelling for multiple reasons. But I think, as an academic, I always take it with a pinch of salt as well, just in terms of give me the, the hard evidence, the evaluation. And I think perhaps that's where we need to move towards. You mentioned terminology right at the beginning. And isn't that interesting? Because I do think it links to customer tolerance. So it seems to me facial recognition as a term is perhaps the most contentious or the most triggering for people. In the USA, the use case that we heard, and they said they'd had no public backlash at all. Their signage said they were using biometric technology. No mention of cameras, no mention of faces. And I just do you think there's something in that about how we term this?
Well, interesting enough, I had noticed that some of the UK retail stores have actually switched to using the words biometric. So perhaps it is something that is a better way of describing this, given the sort of bad publicity around the words face recognition. And
yeah, I mean, there's nothing more sensitive than your face, is there? That is probably the most personal thing, isn't it? So maybe if we move away from that towards biometrics, which I would have thought would be a scarier word, but I don't know, perhaps some sort of testing of customers around what makes them feel more or less comfortable.
Well, it was, I mean, as you said, this particular retailer, although they don't advertise and toot their horn that they got facial recognition, they use the words biometric and have had no complaints.
Incredible, isn't it? The power of a word.
Yeah, it really is very, very powerful. I think one of the interesting things was where you put the cameras, and I think we've seen two examples. I think what was really fascinating about the American example is they put them 100 feet in the, the ceiling was 100 feet or so, and they put the camera up there, but on a big zoom lens, which they said really helped them, sort of like the people that tried to dip their heads and things like that, they were able to sort of pick up on them. So I was really impressed by the technology over there in terms of how it can zoom in on.
Yeah.
And then we have the question of accuracy. So I think my sense is that beyond 95%, if you want to set a threshold, if it's 95% confidence in the machine learning and the algorithms that it's a match, that's possibly when you should give that to the store,
Mm.
because and then the store can then make its mind up as to whether that it is a good match. I think if it's only a 50% match, then I think you're going to get a lot of potential false alerts, or even though the worst that can happen arguably is good customer service. But a sense
I'd
of
like, yeah, sorry, no,
yeah, so there's a sense though that this how you getting compliance stores can, and I'm perhaps going off the stores can sometimes be tempted to go over the line in terms of if there's a person that they've recognised, whilst the message from head office might be just get great customer service and talk to them and all the rest of it. I'm sure there's some stores that would be tempted to say just to ask them to leave the store, which is where accuracy then becomes a really big problem.
Absolutely. And we've seen some terrible cases already of people who have been marched out of stores, completely inaccurate match. And sadly, it's confirmed to those who are critical of facial recognition that there might well be a racial and gender bias within it. So I think for me, accuracy is really key. And what I would like to see is an industry benchmark, like a standard threshold of accuracy. And I think all suppliers should have to publicly demonstrate, have it verified independently and show what their accuracy rate is. And then it's up to the retailers as well to set their threshold of what they think an acceptable match is. So whether that we've heard 80%, 90% confidence levels. But as you know, it's really about, well, then how do people respond to it as well? So I think the best practice for me is around then having maybe two people independently check, humans actually check the technology before intervening. Now, of course, I think that customer service is probably the best way to go rather than just flinging people out of your store. But what if that individual, they're pinging because they're violent, and that's the match that they've come up on, there has to be a way of also saying, do not approach this person because last time they were approached, they assaulted somebody. So I think we just need to have this really clear sort of understanding. How accurate is it? Let's verify that. Should they be approached? If they shouldn't, what do we do next? Because that's where this training of store associates, I think, is going to be the success or not of facial recognition and whether customers will put up with it or desire it.
So I think I certainly believe that the industry should get its act together and come up with a set of guidelines on how to use this. Before the regulations get in the way. I've been saying that for 10 years, so maybe someone will do something about that now. And Emmeline, you're actually very well placed to do that. I think you're also very much right about the accuracy pieces as well. And I like the addition of some sort of independent verification of their accuracy rather than relying on schoolboys marking their own homework. So, I think
exactly.
those are really good points on this technology, which does seem to be growing in relevance for retailers. I mean, especially if it does what it says on the tin, which seems to be it has a real impact on behaviours. At least gives the store manager and the security guard, advanced warning. And I think one of the things that I remember from the call was, this particular technology is your most reliable loss prevention person in the whole store. This is,
that's
not on their phones.
That.
They're not distracted.
They were described as a perfect employee, wasn't it? Yeah. Sorry for all those.
No, all the things. Just go to a litany of accusations against the sort of, some of the security guards. And employees, be distracted on their phones. Turn up late to work, can't, that's sick. Go off on a lunch break. Yeah. So they're there all the time. It's there all the time, and protecting you 24/7. But again, I think just the other point you made is I think that there are some of the technologies, I'm not aware of all of them, but when the original offence is taken place, they are asked to complete whether this was a violent case or whether it was just stealing a
Yeah.
Mars bar or whatever. So when the face comes up that's matched, there is a flag whether they've been violent or not.
Yeah, I think that's really important to know how best to proceed. There can't be, a one case fits all training response to that. But yeah, I just think, this has to be part of the answer. We know that we've got a real issue with prolific repeat offenders, and just being able to piece together the details on those people who take advantage of there often being lots of police jurisdictions, and so long as they move between them, at the moment, they don't necessarily attract the attention that they should do. We're seeing a lot of retrospective facial recognition already, and I think there's a much bigger tolerance for that at the moment. So using stills from body worn or CCTV cameras, checking it against police databases to see whether that is a wanted offender. But it's this live facial recognition, isn't it? I think we haven't quite got there yet in terms of retailers feeling okay with this. So I mean, I can remember the days of, CCTV being introduced, and what was pivotal was that code of practice. It was issued by the Information Commissioner's Office in the UK. And suddenly retailers said, oh, fantastic. We've essentially got a tick list here. If we do this, we're compliant. We know exactly how to operate them. And we've got, some nudges towards best practice and effectiveness. So I think what's missing maybe is that code of practice for the deployment of facial recognition, and that could really spearhead their use.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right on that. Yeah, so that.
I'm glad this is being recorded, Colin. Absolutely right. I think that's the first.
Yeah, no, absolutely right. It's much needed, to advance this. Well, look, as you say, the biometrics positioning might well be something that moves us on as well.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, look, we're going to be coming back to this again in a year's time. Already scheduled the meeting, so no doubt we'll have more cases as this all evolves, and things will definitely change for sure. And the adoption rates, I think, will grow as long as
definitely.
As long as we have that code of practice, perhaps that could be it.
Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed. Thank you very much indeed for your time, and we will see you next time. Thank you very much, Emily.
Thanks, Colin.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Well, that's all we have time for this week. Thank you for joining us, and thanks to all the ECR retail loss community for the sharing of their knowledge, their research, and latest learnings that ensure that we become truly a global platform for learning. My name is Colin Peacock. This is the Sell More and Lose Less podcast. And if you liked it, please subscribe so you automatically get all future episodes. And also, if you think your colleagues and friends might also like it, please ask them to follow ECR Retail Loss on LinkedIn and tune in to our next podcasts. If you didn't like it, then let us know and we'll try and fix it. Either way, see you next time. Thank you again.